The next presentation will be given by Stijn Bruers, who is one of the few speakers who have been at the International Animal Rights Conference every year. He has a PhD in physics and philosophy and is an active member of the animal rights group Bite Back. He is also the author of books about environmental ethics and animal rights. In his presentation today, he will be giving an overview of some recent social psychological studies and findings related to meat consumption and speciesism.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So the topic of today will be a social psychology. The argument that I want to make this evening is a lot of meat eaters, I mean people who eat animal products. It's objectively speaking. A lot of meat eaters, they do something against their own moral values. So a lot of meat eaters that we know, our families, our neighbors, or our colleagues, or whatever, if they still eat meat, at least a lot of those people, they do something that they actually is in violation with other values that they have. I want to demonstrate this with all kinds of recent social psychological research. And in the end of my presentation, I will also present some new developments about speciesism. So these are very interesting times. Finally, psychologists are studying speciesism after studying racism and sexism in the past. Before we start, this one was a Dutch television program, Real Girls in the Jungle. So imagine those 10 women on an island and they had to do some challenges. And one of the tasks that they had to do is capture a chicken, kill it, bake it, eat it. Actually, I should say eat him or her because it's not an it. Now, look at the reactions of those women. Why is she looking away when the chicken is hit? They scream, hit him, kill him, with the hands in the head. Yeah, you see the facial expressions. You see even more panic. It's really a difficult task for them. So they even say, okay, this is really the shit. This one is a very interesting reaction. One woman spontaneously yells, he still lives. Notice that she says he still lives and not it still lives. This was a spontaneous reaction of one of those women. Why does she scream like that? Why would she say that? So another woman said that it was a really terrible challenge. One of the worst things that she did in her life. So it's really a problem. If you think about it, this one program that I was watching on television, and then there was another program, so I looked to another channel, and there was another woman working in the garden, you know, taking some salads and smile, and you see the difference in the reactions. You see that this woman here does not scream like he still lives. Yeah? No, they really don't have a problem with cutting the leaves and so on and then plugging the carrots out of the ground. Why are these reactions so completely different? Why is it so difficult to kill a chicken with your own hands and killing a plant with your own hands, you can even do it with a smile. Yeah? If now people say to you that humans are carnivorous species, then now you can say, now you have to explain this to me because I've never seen a lion reacting like that. You know, if a lion would react like this, I mean, so we might have been carnivorous in the past, but apparently now women in our culture, they are not carnivorous. They have really emotional difficulties with killing animals. And they do not have emotional difficulties with killing plants. It's spontaneous reaction. Of course, we know the mechanism. It's empathy, spontaneous feeling of empathy that you have with the chicken. And that's why she yells, he still lives, because she realizes that the chicken is still alive and suffers. And suffering is wrong. So she wants the chicken to be dead as quickly as possible, yeah, because she knows that it's a sentient being. On the other hand, with the plant, you're not care about whether the salad still lives. You don't want to rip it into pieces to make sure that it does not suffer, because yeah, we don't feel empathy with salad and with carrots. And yeah, the scientists can tell you that they are not sentient beings. So okay. So another challenge, that thought experiment that I can give you is, suppose there are two things running around here. One is there on the left, and the other one, I bought it in Japan. It runs around. It's as big, with some arms and so on. Now, what I want you to do is kick one of these two things. Is it equally difficult? Who says that kicking the chicken is more difficult than kicking the robot? Hands up if you say it's. Hands up if you say it's far more difficult. And now let's say you really grab the chicken and do whatever. That's really difficult. With the robot, okay, the robot has some arms and then you might get hurt if you. But with robots, I think I can even do it with smashing a robot like this. So psychologists, they have a term for this, cognitive dissonance. It's, let's do another thought experiment first. Imagine you're at a dinner table. It's really funny to do this. You're sitting in front of a person and this person is eating, let's say, tomatoes. And you say to this person, well, did you know that tomatoes, they are round and juicy, and if you cut them into pieces, they lose their shape and their juice, and I think it's immoral, it's not respectful towards the tomatoes to cut them into pieces like that, because, yeah, it should be round. Imagine the reactions of this tomato eater, yeah? I'm sure you can imagine it, and if you don't imagine it, just do it. And now the very same situation, you're sitting in front of a meat eater and you say, well, did you know that this piece of meat, it comes from a cow, it's the flesh from a cow, the muscle tissue, and the cow is a sentient being and didn't want to die, and you can imagine the reaction on the table. So there is a huge difference in the reaction, yeah? In the second case, with the meat eater, the reaction will be all kinds of rationalizations, arguments. Give me an argument that you've heard from a meat eater. Someone? What would the meat eater say if I say to him, did you know that this comes from a cow and then a cow can suffer and it's not moral? Cows are alive. Yeah. Yeah. So the tomato eater will not say, I don't care, I want to enjoy my food. The tomato eater will not say it. The tomato eater will not say, it doesn't feel anything. What else do you hear from a meat eater? Some other reaction? Yeah. The tomato eater will not say, look, tomatoes are made to be eaten. You will not hear this argument from the tomato eater. Just test it, you will not hear it. From the meat eater, you will hear it like, you know, if we stopped eating meat, then the cows would not even live. That's an argument. Now, the tomato eater would not say, look, if we stop eating tomatoes, tomatoes would not even be there. You do not hear that argument from the tomato eater, but you hear it from the meat eater. Okay? And all the arguments that you've ever heard given by meat eaters, you will never ever hear this kind of answer, this kind of argument by a tomato eater. Just think about what this means about what we meat eaters actually realize and know deep in themselves. So cognitive dissonance, that's the theory. It's a term launched by Leon Festinger in the 1950s. The principle, it says that your behavior is in contradiction with your values. So you do something and you have moral values, so do not harm anyone, and you harm someone. That's a contradiction. And if your behavior is in contradiction with your values, then really the craziest things happen in your brain and in your thinking, and that's called cognitive dissonance. Festinger, he first studied it with infiltrating in a doomsday cult. These people, they thought that tomorrow the world will collapse and we will be rescued by the aliens. But then at 12 o'clock at night, nothing happened, no aliens, no world destruction. And then how would those people in this cult react? So they invested a lot in this cult, in their beliefs. They even give up their work, they give up their families and so on. And then suddenly they realized I was wrong. It's not easy for those people who invested a lot in their beliefs to simply say like, oh yeah, I was wrong for all those years. Yeah, okay. I do something else again. Okay, yeah. No, it's really cognitive dissonance. It's really, it's crazy what people can do then. Now, another experiment, also in the 50s, is also related to cognitive dissonance, is about moral attitudes. So we have students, it's a cheating experiment. Students, in the beginning of the experiment, they had to fill in a test, an examination. And you ask in the beginning of the experiment their moral attitude, their opinion about cheating. Is it bad? Yeah, all the students agree, they all say the same. It's bad, but it's not that bad. I mean, you're not a moral monster if you cheat, but you should not cheat. It's bad, okay? That's the consensus. And now, in the experiment, half of the students, they were put into a situation where they are kind of forced to cheat. They could cheat, and they did cheat. And the other ones, they did not cheat. They were not forced to cheat in a way. So the second group, they did not cheat. And then after the experiment, you ask again their opinions. So the ones who cheated, they passed the exam. The ones who did not cheat, they failed the test. Okay? Now, if you ask the first group what you think about cheating, what would they answer now? They say like, well, it's not that bad. You know, cheating is not that bad. If my friend cheated, he would still be my friend. You know, I can live with cheaters. In a second group, what did they say? They said, cheaters are moral monsters. It's terrible, cheating. If my friend would cheat, he would not be my friend anymore. I mean, they were, their opinion was more strongly against cheating. So you see a divide. They started with the same opinion, and then after the experiment, they have a clear divide. The ones who cheated became more relaxed and more permissible about cheating, and the ones who did not cheat, they were less permissible. And what it says about cognitive dissonance, well, first of all, the cheaters, they did something that was in contradiction with their values. So what you do, your behavior is in contradiction with your values. One of the strategies that you can do is change your values. Say that it's not that bad. Your moral attitude changes. That's one of the strategies. In the second group, the ones who did not cheat, they also suffered from a cognitive dissonance. Why? Well, because they failed the test. They did not cheat, they invested a lot in not cheating, and therefore they failed the test. So they now think like, I failed the test, I'm stupid, but the reason why I failed the test is because I did not cheat. So now I tell myself a story that cheating is really bad, and then I'm really good, because I did not cheat, and cheating was really bad. My hypothesis will be that also new vegans or vegetarians who are really ethical vegans and so on. What I often notice with new vegans is that their attitude towards eating meat and towards meat eaters changes, and they become more radical towards meat eaters. So my claim is that both meat eaters and vegans, we started with the same moral attitude, but then after the experiment, after one group ate meat and the others refused to eat meat, then there is a divide. And for vegans, it's an investment not to eat meat and not to join the group of meat eaters. That's more in terms of psychology, it's an investment. And you have to tell yourself a good story to keep on investing in this behavior of not eating meat. And the good story that you give yourself is that meat eating is really, really bad, and meat eaters are moral monsters. So that's why you see often vegans in the beginning become more radical, and their language changes towards words like meat eaters are moral monsters and meat is murder and things like that. Although in the beginning, in this experiment, the cheating experiment, in the beginning, both groups they actually had the same opinion. So we are not really that different from other people. We started from the same opinions. We are more alike than we realize. Meat eaters and vegans, we are more alike than we realize. So, now I explained a bit about cognitive dissonance. Now psychologists, they want to know if meat eating is really an example of cognitive dissonance. And you see, I've put links here. These are very recent experiments, 2012, 2011. Very nice experiments in the lab, asking subjects about their opinions. In this case, what they did is you have two groups of people, and they had to fill in a questionnaire about their opinions about the mental capacities of animals. In what sense can they think? In what sense can they feel? So a questionnaire about feelings and thoughts of animals. Now you have two groups. The first group, when they're sitting at their desk filling in a questionnaire, in front of them was a bowl with sausages, meat sausages, and they know that after the experiment they were allowed to eat from this sausages. The second group of people, they were sitting in front of a bowl with nuts or apples, you know, and they were allowed to eat the nuts after the experiment. Now, without the food, no sausages, no nuts on the table, without the food, those people would most answer the same, give the same answers to the questions. Yeah, animals, they have some mental capacities, they do have a mind, they can feel this and that, but they cannot think this and that, and they are not rational and not moral, but still they can experience this and that. So they rather agree with what animals can and cannot do. Now, those same people, when you place them in front of the bowl with meat sausages, these people, when they realize that soon they will eat meat, in their questionnaire, they will ascribe less mental capacities towards animals. Yeah? And the other group, who would eat nuts, they would still ascribe more mental capacities, like being able to suffer, ascribe more mental capacities towards animals. So it's only triggered by the thought that you will soon eat meat. The reason why this is a cognitive dissonance is that, okay, if you are confronted with the thought that animals are sentient beings, and this part here is from an animal, and I'm soon going to eat this one here. That's a cognitive dissonance, because I value the principle do not harm anyone. And my behavior will be I'm going to eat a piece of meat. So that's a cognitive dissonance. So what I will do to decrease this, this problem in my head is, one thing I can do is, there are different things you can do. Change your behavior, change your value, or change your perception. So I already give an example of change your value. Say, like, okay, it's not that bad to harm someone. But in this case, it's really difficult to do that. Saying it's not bad to kill someone, that's cheating, okay, but saying that it's not bad to kill someone, that's a problem. Changing your behavior, well, you intended to eat the meat, so yeah, you can become a vegetarian. But the third thing you can do is change your perception. So my idea is you should not cause unnecessary suffering. But you know what? I'm going to think that animals cannot suffer that much. I will ascribe less mental capacities to animals. So I'm going to think that they have lower brains, lower minds. They can't feel that much pain. So that's what you see in those answers, the responses that they give in the questionnaire. Those people who had a cognitive dissonance and would go eating meat, they had a strategy of changing their perception, thinking that animals are not that sentient. They do not have that much of a mind inside of them. And that particularly happens with those animals that they were going to eat. The cows and the pigs and the chickens, not with the dogs. With the dogs, they can still say, like, okay, I know a dog can suffer. But the animals that they were going to eat, the cows, they can't suffer that much. So that's not really consistent, but that's how they manage to change their perception. It even works with simple wordings like in one of the experiments, they again had to fill in a questionnaire after reading a story about a tree kangaroo somewhere in Borneo. I don't know where the tree kangaroo lives, but the story, there are two different stories. One subject, he reads the story that tree kangaroos are a species and they do this and that in the trees. Okay, it's what a biological story. And the second group, they had a similar story, except that it also referred to tree kangaroos are eaten by the local people. Yeah, they are a culinary delicacy by the local people there on this island. Now again, they have to answer questions like, what can a tree kangaroo feel? What can it think? Or rather, what can he or she think? And what the experimenters saw is that those people who learned about the fact that tree kangaroos are food by local people, they ascribed less mental capacities to tree kangaroos. Tree kangaroos, they can't suffer. Yeah. Those who simply hear the biological story, like tree kangaroos, they live in trees and they are mammals, they think like, okay, tree kangaroos are sentient. So even with simple wordings like saying this animal is eaten by that person, even that can trigger a reaction that changes your perception about what this animal can feel or think. Yeah? Is this clear? That's called the meat paradox. It's the best proof that I can give you that meat eaters, they have cognitive dissonance. The proof is that they change their perception to decrease the turmoil in their head, the turmoil from cognitive dissonance. Yeah, other things about human uniqueness, that's also a recent study. It basically says that we all agree, even the farmers, people in livestock, slaughterers and so on, if we look at pictures of animals, we can see what they feel. This pig is happy, this pig is in pain and fear. We can immediately see it, we are good in it, even livestock farmers. That's for the primary emotions, fear, pain, suffering, joy. But what about the secondary emotions, the higher emotions, like guilt, love, shame, remorse, you know, empathy. So these are typically called the human emotions because most people think that it's exclusively humans that have them, but that's not true, of course. Animals also can feel empathy. Okay, so now we ask again, everyone, the farmers, the meat eaters, the vegans, we ask them about pigs and dogs. What kind of secondary emotions do they have? And it happens that, so with the primary emotions, we are consistent. We consistently say pigs and dogs both can feel primary emotions. With the secondary emotions, you see a difference. The vegans are consistent. Vegans say pigs and dogs can feel secondary emotions to some degree. So the vegans are consistent in that sense. The meat eaters, they are not consistent. The meat eaters think that dogs can feel more secondary emotions than pigs. Pigs, they have lower minds. They can't feel that much secondary emotions. And so the meat eaters, they make a distinction between edible and non-edible meat, non-edible animals. So dogs are non-edible. For dogs, they can say consistently that the dogs can feel some kind of secondary emotions. But about the edible animals, those animals that they eat themselves, the chickens, the cows, and the pigs, for them, they have a cognitive dissonance. They have a value, you should not cause unnecessary suffering and you should not harm anyone. They have the behavior, I cause unnecessary suffering and I harm someone. So the solution will be change the perception, saying that it's not really suffering because the pig does not really suffer that much. It does not have that much secondary emotions. So meat eaters, they have a less consistent view about ascribing emotions to animals. Yeah, there are a lot of other mechanisms that we see in cognitive dissonance. In what is called moral disengagement, if you do something that violates your own values, what you can do is shifting or spreading responsibility. I did not kill the cow, it was a slaughter. So spreading responsibility, I'm not the only one eating a cow, everyone, my friends, everyone does it. The rationalizations, like I said before, like if we do not eat cows, then cows would not even be born and not even have a life. These kind of reactions, rationalizations, remember the tomato eater, you don't hear them from them. Euphemisms, so softening the language. It's technically speaking, you can say killing an animal for food, it's really killing or murder. But often meat eaters, they change language. Slaughtering is something else than killing. Denying or minimizing harmful consequences, so by denying a mind of someone else. So the pig does not have a mind, so the consequence cannot be that harmful because the pig does not feel anything. Denying or minimizing consequences, that's what you often hear from some perpetrator or so. Yeah, I know I hit him, but I didn't hit him that hard. I mean, and yeah, you can, it does not hurt that much. I mean, if I do this, it does not hurt that much. So, and then the fifth one, dehumanizing victims. And that's a really terrible kind of moral disengagement. It's really saying it's their own fault. You sometimes hear it like, you know what, if the pig would be more powerful, pigs would eat humans. Huh? I mean, and chickens, they would be would attack humans if they had the chance to do it, you know. So dehumanizing the victim is like saying it's their own fault. The women who were raped, well, they provoked it. It's their own fault. The pigs who were eaten, like, yeah, you know what? But pigs, they eat others, and then they would eat us if they were more powerful. So blaming the victim, actually, huh? That's really a terrible thing to do, morally speaking. You do not only cause harm to someone else, but then you say that it's his fault. Now, these kind of reactions, remember the tomato eater, none of those reactions you will hear from a tomato eater. Related to this cognitive dissonance is the Carnistic numbing. Most of you might be familiar with the work of Melanie Joy also a social psychologist who studied the Carnistic ideology. So she gave a name to the hidden ideology that meat eaters have. So vegans, we have a overt ideology. It's called veganism. But in order to justify meat eating, also meat eaters, they have an ideology. And you can hear justifications such as meat is normal, natural, or necessary. None of these things are true, but okay. But why is this important, carnistic numbing? The mechanism is that if you have a cognitive dissonance in your values and your behavior, it's in conflict, what you can do is take up an ideology, we call it carnism, and this ideology will change your perception. How it works goes like this. So people want to have a positive self-image, that's for sure. Consistency between values and behavior is part of this. We value consistency. Now, a positive self-image does not allow for unnecessary violence against innocent individuals. We are good people. My self-image depends on what I did towards others. If I caused unnecessary violence, I will not think that good about myself anymore. Meat production is a kind of unnecessary violence. Tomato eating is not, but meat production. And yeah, meat consumption is a form of complicit violence, so second-hand violence, like let someone else do the dirty work. You give a financial incentive, like. Yeah. Then, fifth, the meat consumption causes cognitive moral dissonance, a conflict between values and behavior, and that is a threat to your self-esteem. And therefore, psychic numbing is a response to a threat of positive self-image. So you stop thinking about the problem. You stop thinking about what animals can feel. You don't look in their eyes. You don't want to hear anything about it. So another thing that, if the meat eater in front of the table here, the reaction will be, I don't want to hear anything about it. Yeah? You might hear that reaction. With the tomato eater, she will not respond with, I don't want to hear about it. No. The tomato eater really does not have a problem with cutting tomatoes. Even if you say it's immoral and not respectful, she will not believe it. So carnistic numbing is used in order to reduce such dissonance. Some other evidence that about the problems we have with violence towards animals. You go ask or study slaughterhouse workers. That's a kind of post-traumatic stress syndrome that a lot of them acquire. It's called perpetration-induced traumatic stress. You see it with a lot of war veterans. It's very difficult to kill someone else. The first time that you killed someone else in the battlefield, the next days you're numbed. It's like this carnistic numbing. You're psychologically numbed. It's very difficult to kill someone if you're not used to that. But the same goes with slaughterhouse workers. Now, so even people working in slaughterhouse, a lot of them, they have emotional difficulties. And they do not work that long in slaughterhouses, a year, and then they are burnt out. And then afterwards you see the symptoms, nightmares, concentration failure. So they become more anxious, more nervous. So all the kinds of traumatic stress, post-traumatic stress symptoms. So that's my basic proof that meat eaters do something against their own values. Now you might answer like, no, I don't believe it, because why the hell would they do it? I mean, if it's in contradiction with your values, why would you do it? Why would you eat meat? Especially those people that we know, our friends, our colleagues, family members who still eat meat. Why do they really eat meat? If they already have the values that we should have empathy towards anyone, we do not cause unnecessary suffering. And this is the social psychology of situationism. It says that we are good people in bad situations, and that turns ourselves into people doing bad behaviors. So first, again in the 50s, there were the conformity experiments, or the group pressure experiments by Ash. So we can make you believe weird things if in an experimental setup, people had to say which of the 3 lines are equal in length of this one. Now, everyone, I paid everyone here to lie and say that the first line is equal in length to this one here, although it's in reality it's not the case. And you are the only person who are the test subject. Yeah. So everyone says, I think line A is equal to this line here. And you, at the end, your response will be line A is equal in length, even if they are clearly not equal in length. So we can, some other experiments refine this and try to figure out how, if you can make people really believe that the lines are not equal in length, and even to a degree, we can make you believe weird things due to some kind of group pressure. Then the bystander effect, like everyone is in the game. There is smoke coming here. No one reacts because you're all actors and then you are really relaxing and enjoying my presentation. Except you, you're the only real test subject. And you see clearly the smoke coming and you smell it, it's really smoke. And everyone sits still. Okay, I smell the smoke, but I don't react. Now, chances are very high that you will not react. Even if in reality it would be a real fire and you will wait half an hour and you will still not react. That's one of the reasons why sometimes there's a real danger with smoke and people not reacting, that a lot of people die. Although they had the time to escape the building, they were just sitting there. Same bystander effect if someone is injured and no one helps, then you're less likely to help. So that's group pressure. Some more extreme experiments were done by Zimbardo, the famous prisoners experiments. You might have heard about it. So with students, people like me, really, people like us, put them into a situation. One half of the students are prisoners, and the other one half of the group were prisoner guards. And it's kind of role-playing game, and in the beginning, okay, they do it like it should go. But soon, things were running out of hand, and you can look at on the internet what kind of things the guards started to do with the prisoners. The experiment was foreseen to be during 2 weeks, but already after 6 weeks, it had to stop. And even the psychologist Zimbardo was himself playing a guard. Actually, the experiment should have stopped earlier. It was due to an external person who saw what was happening and said to Zimbardo, you should stop. It was already days too late, what was happening, the cruel things, the inhuman treatment. And then Zimbardo realized, like, my God, even myself, I did not see it. I was in the situation and I did not see the cruelty. Milgram's obedience experiments, they are the most famous, I guess, if you did not hear about it. Well, the experiment goes as follows. Again, your role, you're the test subject, and your role will be the one of a teacher. In the room over there, there's a student playing a memory test, and you're sitting in front of a panel with switches, with voltages, and you can give electric shocks to the other person over there. The other person is in reality an actor. You do not know that. You think it's really a student doing a memory test. And I am the professor, I'm Milgram, and I say to you, okay, the rules are simple. It's something to test the memory of this person over there in situations of distress. So we start with 0 voltage. a wrong answer will be increasing to 15 voltage and giving an electric shock. And every time he answers incorrectly, you increase again the voltage by 15 volts. And on a panel, you can see at 150 volts it reads danger, 300 volts it reads really danger, and 450 volts, that's the maximum, it's a warning sign deadly or something. So you can really see what's the consequence of giving those levels of voltage. Now, what Milgram first did is ask the psychologists, like, what would be the percentage of students, of people like us, who would give a lethal electric shock to an innocent, unknown person? And the psychologists, they say 0.1% because that's the, yeah, the what's the name? Psychopaths? Yeah. So, the psychopaths. Now, Milgram, he did several experiments, and in the best experiment that he did, he managed to raise the percentage of people who went up to the deadly 450 volts. He raised that percentage to 90% of the students. 9 out of 10 people gave an innocent, unknown person a deadly electric shock. Yeah. And of course, these are students like us, and if I ask you, would you do it? Would you go to 450 volts? You would now say, of course not, it's terrible. I would stop immediately. I mean, after 50 volts, I would say, yeah, go ahead. If your experiment, I quit. It's not good. But no, 9 out of 10, so probability 9 out of 10 that you would also go up to the deadly voltage. And so how did he manage it? There are some tricky things that are in the context, in the situation of the experiments. And those similar tricky things we can see in our culture in that we manage to eat meat. One of the things is a reasonable motive. So at first sight, it's an experiment testing memory, and the idea is if you increase the stress of this person, the memory will increase, and in the beginning you can see it like, okay, if the threat of a voltage is higher, then the responses will be more correct, and then the memory will improve. So in the beginning, you think that's it's the cover-up story, and the story is it's a memory test. The same with eating meat. It's a reasonable motive, it's nutritious, it's tradition. That's a reasonable motive for a lot of people. We do it all the time, and it's nutritious. Secondly, eating animal products is not always an all or nothing issue. You can increase consumption by small bits. For vegans, it's very clearly to see that the small pieces of milk in the biscuits on one hand, and drinking a lot of milk and eating a lot of meat on the other hand. So there is not really a sharp boundary like, okay, from here we are completely vegan. Huh? And you can increase it during history or during your bringing up as a childhood. Again, with the Milgram experiment, you also see the small increments. It's not immediately from 0 to 450 volts. If you do that, if Milgram would have asked the test subject, like, okay, wrong answer, go to this 450 volts, of course everyone would refuse. Yeah? But the slight increases we're already now at 50, now 65, and then again, it's really tricky, this kind of mechanism. Now the victims, the actor in the other room, you could not see it. The test subjects could not see the actor, the guy who was doing the memory test. So what you could hear is him screaming. After 150 volts, he starts screaming and knocking on the door, let me out, let me out. At 200 volts, start screaming like, my heart, I have a heart problem, let me out, let me out. At 300 volts, you go on, you go on. At 300 volts, suddenly no response anymore. Now, you've been told that no response is a wrong response, so 10 seconds, wrong response, increase it, 315 volts. And then another question, okay, wrong response, 330 volts. And you go on, but you keep silent. He's already dead. And even then, you move on to 450 volts. So now, what would happen if this actor, this person was really sitting in front of you and screaming in front of you? Yeah, most likely you would stop. You would see like, same with the animals, they are not visible. What we see of the animals, yeah, that's advertisements on television, you know, the commercials about milk and so on, they really give a false impression. Another, a fourth thing that's happening in the situation is it's rather easy to shift the responsibility to others, to the butchers or the fishermen, like I did not kill the animals, it's the butcher. The same with Milgram. If the test subject was giving the electric shocks, and would complain like, who is responsible for this? And then Milgram would say, I'm completely responsible for the experiment and the outcomes of the experiments. Then you as a test subject, you think like, okay, if I kill him, Milgram is responsible. Okay, you're not really thinking that, but it's more easy to shift the responsibility to someone else, and that makes it easier for you to increase again and again the voltage. People are often influenced by people in authority positions, like parents, teachers, celebrities, and politicians. So if your famous celebrities and teachers and parents, if they all eat meat, you would also likely eat meat. The same with the Milgram experiments. I'm standing here in a white coat as the professor with my diplomas on the back wall and my assistants here, and we are clever people and we stay calm. And you as a test subject, you will rather obey us. And I say keep on, it's important for the experiment to keep on, and you go on because someone in authority, in an authority position, says you to keep on. Another very tricky thing is that other people act as if nothing is wrong. So in the Milgram experiment, this guy over there in the other room is really yelling and screaming, let me out, let me out. And I'm standing relaxed here. It's important for the experiment to continue. So next question, okay, wrong answer. Stay calm, my assistants, no one reacts, stay calm. Everyone, the meat eaters here, we're living in an environment where everyone else stays calm. And especially if there are other people with whom we feel a connection, family and friends and colleagues, if they still stay calm, then we are most likely to continue eating meat. In the experiments, what's raised the level up to 90% of test subjects who gave the lethal voltage was if they saw another student, another test subject sitting next to them, sitting in the same situation, doing the same things, and increasing the level up to 450 volts. Now this other person here, it was also an actor, and this actor had a task to move up to 450 volts. So you are the real test subject, and you ask questions towards this person that you don't see. But next to you, you see someone who has no problem going up to 450 volts. And you know it's a person like you, also a student, a psychology student, or it's like this guy is like you. And this guy here is going up to 450 volts. And then that's the real trigger why you also have a high tendency to also increase to 450 volts. That's really deadly. I mean, seeing another person, someone who is kind of familiar with you, family or friends, if they do something terrible, yeah, then most likely you would do it as well. Speaking about indoctrination, if you don't believe it, these are in school books, it's in Dutch, okay. that you can see it, the pictures in for the little kids, with a poem that says that, yeah, meat is okay. I like a piece of beef, things like that. Yeah, I can't translate it because it's a poem, but here it gives a picture of the animals that you can eat. So that the children, they have to encircle, this you can eat, this is not for food. So the elephant is not for food. Yeah, the pig here, it's food. And then very interesting here on the right side of the panel. So of course you want to learn the kids what happens in the farm, at the farmer's place and the slaughterhouse. Okay, so a cow is brought into a truck, and then there is some doors closed, some rooms, someone cleaning the floor. Okay, and then you see the dead carcasses of the cows in the truck again. So now we know what's happening in where our meat comes from. We know it. There you go. The guy enters the truck, and then there's a room, and then out of the truck comes the carcasses. Of course, they don't show what's really behind the closed doors. I don't know why they don't show it if they really want to show anything to the kids. I mean, why not showing the most crucial part of the process? I mean, driving a cow up to a truck, it's not really crucial. And then in commercials and so on, other books used at school, you know, pigs playing in the circus or so. These are from Dutch, on the Belgian television commercials. And here, I don't know if you can eat it here, la vache qui rit. It's cheese and dairy products. So if you realize what's happened with cows, the cow will not smile. If someone, this is very interesting, you know, a lot of meat eaters, they complain that we animal rights activists should not anthropomorphize animals. But look who was really anthropomorphizing the animals, not us, but they can talk and they can give a massage to each other and they can smile and they can even carry their own friends around their neck here in the upper right picture. So if this is not a anthropomorphization, then I don't know what is. Okay, next related topic. How much time do I have left? It's that means 40 minutes. Okay. Phegophobia, also a term that you might be familiar by now. Let's first tell you a bit about do-gooder derogation and anticipated reproach. Again, you can see it, very recent studies, 2012. Let's go again, look at the Milgram experiments. Let's take the Milgram experiments as an example. Before the experiment, I can ask you, what if your friend gave someone a deadly electric shock? In this experiment, I described the experiment. You did not know anything about the experiment, but your friend was going up to 450 volts. Most likely, you say, well, it's terrible, not a good friend anymore, and so on. But now, after the experiment, you ask the same question to those persons who went up themselves towards 450 volts. And of course, you can imagine those people, they are much less critical towards other people who went up to 450 volts. Yeah? So if you, let's see if I explain it correctly. The idea is if you do something wrong, giving someone an electric shock. I explain first the Milgram experiment first. Now, let's say there is, you heard about a person who refused to move on in the experiment after 50 volts. Yeah? You've learned about this person, like he refused after 50 volts. He said, I will not go on anymore. If you ask people like us, what would your opinion be about this person? You would say, I would rather have him as a friend. You can trust this guy, he has moral principles, he has empathy. I mean, this can be a good friend. So you have a good opinion about the person who immediately refused to move on in the experiment. Now, the same you can ask about the test subjects who did the experiment and who went up themselves to 450 volts. So those people, you ask them, look, this guy here, he refused after already 50 volts. Yeah? You did 450 volts, and that's deadly, okay. But this guy over there, after 50 volts, he refused. What is your opinion about this guy? Would you have him as a friend? And you would say, no, not a friend. He's stubborn, he refuses to cooperate with the experiment. So he sabotages the experiment. I would not have him as a friend because, yeah, he's too stubborn as a friend. You understand what's happening? If you do something wrong yourself and you heard about someone else who did the good thing, you are most likely to degrade this other person, saying he's stubborn or selfish or sabotaging things. And this is called do-gooder derogation. The do-gooder, the other person who did the good thing, you derogate him. The reason, most likely, why you would derogate him is kind of anticipated reproach. So you're unconsciously or consciously afraid that the one who did the good thing will reproach you, will criticize you for not doing the good thing. So you heard about the good guy who was doing the good thing, and you're afraid that he will judge you. And suffering from cognitive dissonance, you're crazy in your head already, and you say, look, this guy is selfish, even if he did the non-selfish thing and did the good thing. The reason why you react like this is anticipated reproach. You're afraid of being criticized by this person. And the same now you can guess what happens with vegans who are criticized by meat eaters. So often hardly criticized by meat eaters. So the vegans are the do-gooders. We do the good thing, and the meat eaters, they realize that the vegans are doing the good things. And the meat eaters, they are afraid of being criticized. And then they have an anticipated reproach. And they say, like, you know, vegans, they are, you can, you know what kind of insults that you can hear from meat eaters. They are stupid, they are inconsistent, they are, no. So this is an example of do-gooder derogation. It has been studied also with questionnaires about vegetarianism. So in this 2012 study, I guess, they asked questions about vegetarianism. And related to that, it's the concept of Phegophobia. So a lot of meat eaters, they are afraid of vegans, afraid in a sense like homophobes are afraid of homosexuals. My hypothesis, but I'm not sure if it's true, is we do know that a lot of homophobe people are themselves homosexuals, but they do not want to recognize this part of themselves because it's in violation of their beliefs in God and so on. And so they suppress their homosexual nature. Yeah? And suppressing this homosexual nature of themselves, one of the strategies to do this is criticizing homosexuality, strongly criticizing homosexuality. That helps. Then you can suppress your own homosexual thoughts. For homosexuals, this might be the case. I don't know if it's really the case for meat eaters, that meat eaters, my hypothesis will be like meat eaters, they realize that actually they should be vegans, they want to be vegans, but they're not vegans, and they want to still enjoy eating meat, and so they have to suppress their vegan likings. And the way to suppress their vegan nature in themselves is by criticizing vegans, hardly, strongly criticizing vegans. So that's perhaps how Phegophobia might work with a lot of meat eaters. So to summarize this part, are meat eaters sweeping their values off the table? I can give you a whole list of evidence that meat eaters do something against their own values. One of them is most meat eaters think that meat from dogs is disgusting, so they do not want to eat dog meat. Calfje Willy, that was a veal calf in Belgium on a Belgian television. It was very famous a few years ago. Some television program, and they did kind of psychological experiments. So 4 guys were presenting this program. They went to a farm and said, okay, we organize a barbecue by the end of the month. Everyone is welcome. Here, this is little calf Willy, and Willy will be on the barbecue next month. Okay. And there was a huge protest in the media and petitions and so on. And no, we should not sacrifice Willy. Then finally, the day of the barbecue, okay, they were enjoying the barbecue, and everyone was curious, was Willy now lying on their table? And then luckily, no, they didn't sacrifice Willy. Unfortunately, they sacrificed another calf. No, so this is calf Barabbas, it was called. And it's another calf, and they sacrificed Barabbas. And yeah, those people, you can look at their faces of a lot of people in the audience, like they were really disgusted by the thought that they were now eating calf Barabbas. So they had a problem with, when they knew the victim, they had a really big problem with eating the victim. We can do the same experiment with Carrot Freddy. So this is Carrot Freddy. Next month there will be a barbecue. I will get into you, no protest. Everyone think like I'm crazy, but my point will not become clear to the audience. No one will have a problem with eating Carrot Freddy. So direction of the tomato eater, as I mentioned, the inconsistency in ascribing mental abilities of animals. The panic when those women had to kill chickens with their own hands. It's more easy to smash a robot than to smash a chicken. The post-traumatic stress syndrome of slaughterhouse workers. Another thing is in indigenous tribes and so on, you can often see hunting rituals, like the Indians whispering in the ears of the bear who was shot, like, I'm sorry. These kind of hunting rituals, they do not do this with fruit picking rituals, like telling, I'm sorry, tomato. No, but the animals that they shot, they often say, they respect it, they bow, they say sorry or something like that. Sometimes they do it with plants as well. Sometimes they bow to the plants, but not that often. Yeah, experiment with the children. They spontaneously want to pet a pig and a dog and do not spontaneously want to kill them. They also do not want to spontaneously pet a broccoli, flower, carrots. We do not develop emotional bonds with cauliflowers, but we do with animals. Even farmers, they can develop an emotional bond with pigs if the situation, if they look in the eyes of a pig, for example. The parents, they want to shield their children from horrific images of livestock industry. So we as Bite Back, one of the actions that we do is in the shopping streets, the cruel pictures of slaughterhouses and farms. And then people with their kids, they walk by and they see the pictures and they walk away and then even hide the eyes of the kids. if you would show pictures of cauliflowers and carrots, they would simply pass by and do not hide the eyes of the children. Then all the kinds of psychological repression mechanisms. So the camouflage, we do not see the victims, the detachment, emotional detachment, dissociation, rationalizations, the euphemisms in our language, shifting responsibility. Culinary taboos about, if you look at culinary taboos, 9 out of 10, it's about an animal product. There are very, very few, it's very hard to find culinary taboos about vegetables. I guess some cultures have a taboo about eating onions, but I don't know how strong this taboo is. But the do-gooder derogation, the response, you just want us to feel guilty. Remember the tomato eater on the table. You will not hear a response. You just want to make me feel guilty. You will not even hear this response. If with the meat eater, if I say, you know, meat comes from a cow and the cow is sentient, the chances are very high that you will hear the response. You just want to make me feel guilty. So that's the first part of my presentation, the biggest part. I demonstrated that a lot of meat eaters, most of them that we know, do something against their own values. I give an evidence of this. And I give also an explanation how this is still possible that they do it. Now I give 2 other examples of social psychological studies about speciesism. One of them, the most interesting, I think, is the interspecies model of prejudice. It's also very recent. So 2012, so a few years ago. It had to do with the mechanism of dehumanization and bestialization. The idea is, for example, in war, you know, the American army, they want to kill the Viet Cong. How can they do it? Well, thinking that the Viet Cong people are baboons. And if you want to kill the Jews, you say they are rats and dirty dogs. And if you want to kill someone, you just say these are just animals, like dirty snakes and whatever animal you can think of that. So this is a degradation of humans, dehumanization, by lowering them to the level of animals. And that is one of the major triggers in racism. So immigrants, you can degrade immigrants by saying those immigrants, yeah, they are just dirty dogs. Now, that was a hypothesis that some psychologists tested recently. The hypothesis is there a causal influence from speciesism to racism? You often hear meat eaters, animal rights activists. You often hear human rights activists say that we should first focus on human problems like racism before we move to speciesism. Now, if this theory, this hypothesis in the species model of prejudice, if this is true, then it's a strong counter-argument to this opinion, because speciesism can trigger racism. What they did is the test subjects, they had to read stories. And one of the stories was about animals, and it says that animals are like humans. They feel like us, they think, they walk like us, they experience like us. So those test subjects, in the beginning of the experiment, you can see how many of them have racist opinions. Now, after the experiments, after they've read the stories about the animals, what these psychologists noticed is that those who read the text that animals are uplifted are like humans, so are uplifted to the level of humans. The people who read those texts, they became less racist towards immigrants. They had less racist opinions towards immigrants and minority groups. And on the other side, there are some test subjects who read the text about that we are like animals. we degrade humans to animals, or they read texts about there's a difference between animals and humans, so they read speciesist texts, and those people who read those texts, if they were racist, if they had racist opinions, they had the same level of racist opinions after reading those texts. So the idea is you can counter racist opinions by giving racists some lecture, some text that says that animals are like humans, uplift the animals to humans. It also works with children. They have tested it also with children. Opinions in schools about children with different skin colors. And after reading text that says what animals can do, like humans, they can feel, they can suffer, they can enjoy this and that. After reading such a text, those children, they became less racist towards other children with other skin colors. One more minute about a second subject of speciesism studied recently in literature. It's called terror management theory. When I first saw it, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was crazy, but the idea is a lot of people apparently are triggered into speciesist ideology by thinking of their own mortality. People have a fear of death. And in our culture, or in a lot of cultures, animals are symbols of mortality. They die, they do not have an immortal soul. So again, the test subjects, they can read stories. One of the stories was about death, about their own death. Imagine that you'll get a deadly disease and so on. And the other test subjects, they read another text, not about death, but about something disgusting, vomit or something. So they were both emotionally triggered. But what happened is that after the experiments, the ones who read the text about their own mortality, they had higher speciesist opinions. They thought that the divide between animals and humans is bigger, is high. And yeah, that humans have an immortal soul, animals don't, and so on. So they become more species that and humans are rational and have a morality and so on. Animals don't have it. So they stressed this speciesist thoughts. And it was really triggered by the text that they read. It was the difference between the two texts was one was about their own death, the other one was just about something else disgusting. So you can trigger speciesist ideas, and you can probably also diminish speciesist ideas by telling stories about. You can diminish racist ideologies. So that's where I want to conclude.
I don't even have to say something. There are a lot of questions.
So thank you so much. I have a comment and I have a question to you. The comment is that I remember that in the ASH conformity experiment, if in the paid among the paid people there was one person who said the truth, actually, that which line was longer, then the test person was more likely to actually agree with the truth. And I think this has a very important message for us vegans, because if there is one person in the room who will speak up for the animals, then even if the majority of the people don't dare to say what they think, they will start to think and think about the truth, right?
Yeah, probably, but there's also recently an experiment about that that might go in the opposite direction, perhaps, I'm not sure. What they did is, so if you are the real test subject, everyone was lying and saying that the length A was equal to this length here, except one person who was telling your opinion. Yeah, but it might be that you're subject to a lot of group pressure.
Yeah, yeah.
And what even happens is that you might even if it's your opinion also that the lengths are not really equal, you might derogate or criticize the person who was telling the truth.
Because you don't want to be attacked like the person.
So you want to be loyal to the group. And extreme loyalty will be not only conforming to the group, but even if there is someone outside of the group criticizing the one outside
I
of the
guess
group.
we experience that every single day.
It's in practice, it might be really dangerous. For example, they studied it with the Basque people in Spain and France. How much of the Basque people support the ETA, the terrorist organization, ETA? And what they found out is that if you're a Basque person, you think that you overestimate the opinion of the other Basque people to support the ETA. You think that all the other Basques are really in favor of the ETA. You think that that's the group opinion of the Basque people. Even if you're against the ETA, personally, deep inside of you, you think that the other people are really in favor of the ETA. Now you meet a Basque person who is critical of the ETA. It might very well be that you strongly criticize this person, even if he holds your own position. And the dangerous thing is that all the Basque people might think the same way. All the Basque people might think that the other ones are strongly in favor of the ETA and want me to strongly criticize the people who are critical about ETA. And everyone has this wrong opinion, unconsciously, it's unspoken, and collectively, together, all the Basque people support too much the ETA and they are trapped collectively. So I'm not sure if this is also the case with meat eating. It might be that even people who really deep inside of them want to be vegan, but they are subject to group pressure, that they strongly criticize vegans because they want to show loyalty to the group, and extreme loyalty will be even criticizing your friends who holds the position that you unconsciously hold yourself.
Okay, well, I was trying to bring something positive out of it, but so I will finish this part on a positive note, thinking that we are here, vegans, and so we are out of conformity. We dare to be different. So if there was a fire behind you, I'm sure that there would be people who would dare to say that, hello, there is a fire. And I think it's because we've been in a situation when we didn't dare to say something, and then we regret it so much that we want to make up to it, that we will not confirm and we will do something, even if the group pressure is very high. The other thing was a question to you. So what do you think? So there is this cognitive dissonance. And let's imagine that I'm having dinner with a carnist, and then I bring up the tomato, and then I bring up the meat issue, that, you know, what you are eating actually. So do you think that if I point out the cognitive dissonance, like I explain to him what is happening in his mind, do you think that would be a useful vegan advocacy, or do you think it will just anger him more?
I'm not sure if it's what I always do when I am having a discussion with a meat eater and I notice that he's suffering from a cognitive dissonance. I will try to explain a bit about psychology and about examples of me having a cognitive dissonance as well. Even me criticizing meat eaters might be part of a cognitive dissonance, as I explained in the beginning of my presentation. Actually, we are not that different, you and I, meat eater and me. But I invested in not eating meat, and so I have a tendency to strongly criticize vegans, meat eaters. Sorry, I try to avoid this, of course. But I can I can give other examples about me suffering from a cognitive dissonance and say, look, everyone, I can tell you this experiment, 9 out of 10, and this experience, it's a situation. You are not a bad person, you're not a mortal monster, but we collectively created a situation where we collectively do something against our own values. That's the main message that I want to give.
And what is the reaction normally? Well, does it help, or what do you think?
Yeah, that helps, I guess. With the experience that I've had, demonstrating similarities between us, like, then they are fascinated by psychology, and they realize that what they suffer is the same what I have suffered. And with other examples, I drove a car and whatever. I have also had examples of cognitive dissonance myself. That makes a connection, and then we can try kind of avoid this struggle inside of it by realizing, like, okay, yeah, I see perception, values, behavior, okay. And then I don't know what happens with those meat eaters afterwards, but in the discussion itself, they become less critical, less argumentative, more open, like, oh, I see, oh, and asking more honest questions about, and what do you eat? But I've heard that it's not healthy. Okay, B12, and okay. So it's a more positive discussion.
We have a lot of questions. I just take the questions in order. I've seen hands going up. So.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Stijn. Very interesting talk, and I'll go away for one and do further research. My question is this, related to what this lady over here said. My issue, my problem, the thing I don't understand is what makes one person change and not another. You're talking about vegans and meat eaters starting at the same place. So how do we put the information between two people? One person sees it and changes, the second person rejects it. That's what I don't understand. I don't understand. I'd love to have the answer to that. Thank you.
I'm not a psychologist myself, and I'm not really know the answer, and I don't think that psychologists know the definite answer to that question. The major point is that we should not underestimate the influence of the situation. So it's called the fundamental attribution error in psychology, that if we see a person doing a terrible thing, we think that it's a decision of this person and it's inherent of this person, although in most cases it's the situation that made this person do this terrible thing. How do nice family fathers become Nazis and kill Jews during the day, and after their work they play with their kids like we play with our kids? It's a situation. It's most often a situation. Apart from the psychopaths and the real dictators and people like that. Now, the positive message that you can give is what Zimbardo did. Zimbardo was the guy with the Stanford prisoners experiment. That went wrong. So we realized, okay, we can create a situation where people do terrible things, where they become monsters. Can we now create a situation where people, those very same people, students, people like me, can become heroes? What situations do we need in order for people to become heroes? And he studied it for a few years, and you can read his work about what elements in the situation, in the context, we can change in order for us, people like us, to spontaneously act in a altruistic, heroic way. Because if you ask people who are doing heroic things, what is striking is that those people say, like, it was normal, it was, I'm not a real hero, I mean, I jumped in front of it and I saved this person, and it was natural, and it was not a big deal, because I think, I just jumped and I saved him. And so they do not think that high about their own heroic deeds. But often these are people like us also. So same person can become a monster or a hero, depending on the situation. And what we or social psychologists have to figure out is how can we tweak the situation so that people spontaneously become more better persons. And if you want to read a really optimistic story, I can advise you the book by Steven Pinker, The Better Angels of Our Nature, I guess it was called. And about the decline of violence in history, we have a lot of evidence that all kinds of violence, wars, rapes, murders and so on, declined during history, and that now at this very moment we are living in the most peaceful period in history. Steven Pinker, he explains why this happens, how this works, and largening circle of compassion, our reasoning skills are increasing, our education is increasing, and so on. We become more fluent in abstract thinking. That's perhaps very important, abstract thinking and being able to generalize and using analogies. If people are more skilled in that, they can enlarge their circle of compassion towards others, not only towards humans but also animals. Steven Pinker. And the book was, I guess, The Better Angels of Our Nature. 1,000 pages, big book, documented with statistics. If you don't believe it, well, problem, but strong evidence that we are, morally speaking, improving a lot.
We have 5 more minutes for 3 more questions.
Yeah. Okay, there were very many interesting points in what you said, but I think a lot of it comes down to the issue of cognitive dissonance and the constraints we put on ourselves, all humans put on themselves to be consistent. And I think the idea of consistency is something that many vegans talk about a lot. And in a way, I think that it's something which is two-sided. It's a two-sided sword. That the idea that we should be consistent, we think that by calling people to be consistent, we will get them to put their acts in agreement with their opinions. But it can work the other way, that the easier way to be consistent is often to put your opinions in agreement with your acts. And in a way, I think that maybe much less call for consistency or more understanding of the fact that we are all humans, and as humans, we are animals and non-entirely rational beings, and that we can also live with having acts and having a certain distance between our acts and our beliefs, and that gives us some freedom also to think of things. I mean, for instance, I started thinking that it was perfectly wrong to eat animals quite a long time before I really stopped eating animals. And if someone had told me that I really had to be consistent, I think maybe I would never have thought of stopping eating animals.
Yeah, the point that I want to make is meat eaters, they value consistency. And the best proof that you can give is they often ask, are these leather shoes? That's an evidence that they value consistency. Now, personally, I also very strongly value consistency. And of course, in a cognitive dissonance, you can do basically 2 things: change your behavior or change your values. And I think in the end, changing the behavior will be easier for a lot of people, easier than changing values. Changing the value that it's normal and natural to not necessarily harm someone, that's difficult to change. I mean, it goes against your spontaneous inborn feeling of empathy and injustice. You really have to, but stop eating meat, okay, if more people around you become vegan, it's more easy for you to become vegan as well. It's easier than stop thinking that harming someone else is not good. So I hope and I guess that in the end, the values, the good values, they will triumph and the behavior will shift towards the values.
Hello, I'm here. Right at the back. Did you see? Okay. First of all, thank you for all your presentation and precious notes about the research that has been done. But I'm actually critical to your approach, which somehow put a picture like black and white, and it was actually dualist as well, and it just put vegans or vegetarians to white side and the meat eaters to kind of black side, and I just thought, are we out of all kinds of exploitation just because we are vegan? And I think this is kind of arrogance too, and this actually may harm the movement when other people somehow perceive that we are arrogant and we think that we are doing the right thing at all. Considering, for example, you said when you remind them the ham, they don't want to know the story, but when you remind them the tomato, they want to know the story. But actually, tomato question is one question we escape from the story too. If you consider that for tomato agriculture, many forced workers somehow in Mediterranean areas, reportedly in Greece, for example, they are worked, sorry for the wrong English, but somehow they are forced to work in tomato areas. In this case, tomato we eat might come from slavery as well. Or if you consider that for any kind of agriculture, we kill animals too, if this is a mass production. Or we can change the example from tomato to chocolate, in which is another example of human slavery. Or you can change subject to mobile phones. When we buy new mobile phones, people in Foxconn in China, they are enslaved somehow. So I hope you understand what I mean. So we vegans can be in exploitation as well, but so we can escape from the production question or from the process question. You know.
In the tomato example, I said that it was immortal because tomatoes are round and juicy, not because they are connected with slavery. You can do the same experiment with, did you know that tomatoes are from Greece and there's slavery over there? If you say this to a person, then yes, you will hear rationalizations and counter-arguments and things like that, like with the meat eaters, because you trigger a real value of this person. This person values anti-slavery and fair working conditions, and that's what you appeal to. But if I appeal to the value of roundness and juiciness, that's not a value that this person has. And if it's not a value that this person has, he will not suffer cognitive dissonance and will not be inclined to give rationalizations and arguments and so on. He will just look like, are you crazy? Huh? So that's the difference. Appeal to someone's values can create a cognitive dissonance. But with the tomato example, I do not appeal to values. And about black and white picture, I actually hope that I would not present a black and white picture between vegans and meat eaters. And I hoped I explained it in the beginning that actually we started from the same position. We are fundamentally deep in ourselves the same. And with the cheating experiment, those students, they started from the same thoughts about it, and then they divided due to their behavior, their opinions divided. But fundamentally, or originally, or whatever you can call it, we are not that different from meat eaters, and we have to accept it, realize it. The meat eaters also with us. If I speak with meat eaters, make the connection with him or her, and that helps in vegan outreach as well. So look for similarities. There are similarities, and in moral terms, we have similarities, like the values that we share, empathy and things like that, not causing suffering and so on. So we do know that most of the meat eaters that we know, they already did behavior that we support. They already bought fair trade foods, and they already boycott foie gras, for example, in the restaurant last year. So they already sometimes make decisions, and they are against bullfighting in Spain, often. They are against whaling in Antarctica. So, and that's a connection. Like, look, you value the life of your dog, and then you're against the whaling. So that's what we and meat eaters share. Of course, within meat eaters, there are a lot of gradations. There are really dominant meat eaters and hierarchical thinking, like supreme beings, and I can eat whatever I want kind of thinking. Okay, you cannot convince them. But a lot of meat eaters that we encounter in our daily lives, our families and friends and colleagues, they do really have values of egalitarianism, equality, fairness, golden rule kinds of things. That's what we share. They already have these values. And we can simply trigger those values in them. Say that oh, you're already against whaling. Okay, so that's a connection that we already share with meat eaters. It's not black and white in that sense.
So even though the findings of these studies are consonant with what we see in society, we are disappointed when we wish that the results would be different, right? So in that way, has any of these studies ever been adjusted or repeated with a different public, adjusted to a public that is into social justice issues, or the same study repeated with a public that already has a profile of being fighting with social justice issues, to see if the results were different?
Yes and no. As far as I'm aware, some studies went a bit deeper into, well, they basically picked out psychology students at random. But we do know that in the group of psychology students, there are some who have a kind of social dominance orientation. That is the hierarchical thinking, like, just give me a piece of meat and the male dominant kind of thing. And there are more universalist, egalitarian-minded people. And then, yeah, of course, you can see differences in the results, like having speciesist opinions and so on. But it's not yet studied in more detail than this, I guess, as far as I'm known. These are very recent studies, the ones about speciesism and the meat paradox, the cognitive dissonance of speciesists. And the next step will be, are social dominance-oriented people less vulnerable to cognitive dissonance than egalitarian-minded people, than people working for Amnesty International, but still eat meat? I mean, we do not know that.
Thank you very much. And I think people must be hungry, and you can maybe you can talk to him during the meal.